I want you to read 4 books of the Old Testament this week. Ezra, Nehemiah, Haggai, and Zechariah. Oh my, some of you are saying, I don't think I can even pronounce them. But you'll find them. Ezra, Nehemiah, Haggai, and Zechariah. The first 2 were leaders in Israel, and the latter 2 were prophets, and each one of them has a book of the Bible named after them. I want you to read them because I want you to see what God did when he built his church, his people in the Old Testament. There are at least 4 events in the history of the Jews that stand out in their minds as turning points. The first is their experience in Egypt, when God called them out of Egypt, and they went to the promised land led by Moses. You know that story. That established a nation of Israel. The second was the experience of Babylon, when a disobedient Israel was exiled, and Babylon becomes a byword, a symbol for disgrace. The third might possibly be called Masada, wherein Jerusalem and the last vestiges of the Jewish kingdom was destroyed by Caesar. And even today you hear the words Masada as a symbol for the end of Israel and her occupation of Palestine. And you might want to move 2,000 years almost into the present, in 1948, with the establishment of the nation of Israel. And in between that time, that which they refer to as the Holocaust, the extermination of Jews under Nazi Germany. These things figure in their minds as the great turning points of their history. The intriguing thing is that they are almost all, without exception, disasters. And it is important for us to understand that in order to love the Jews today. I want to focus on Babylon. Indeed, I want to focus on their experience in Babylon and coming out of it in the next weeks as I preach to you from the books of Ezra, Nehemiah, Haggai, and Zechariah. My heart is stirred up that we would see how God led those people in rebuilding. I want you to see that because we are asking him to do many of the same things. Unlike Israel, we are not in Babylon as a result of disobedience. But like Israel, we stand before God, beseeching him to do something in us, for us, through us, and through other things, so that we can build a new church and be built up as a people within it. If you read these books, you might want to have a look not at what they did, but ask yourself this question: what was God doing in these books to draw together a people once shattered and make them again his own? Ask yourself, what did he do to rebuild the people? What did he do to rebuild their worship? What did he do to rebuild their place of worship? What did he do to recall leaders for them? What did he do to revive the work when it fell slack? What did he do to rebuke the opposition that came up against the work? What did he do to renew the people? Who did he call? One leader was a pioneer, one was a scholar, one was a fighter, and one was an administrator. He used them all. It's a tremendous story. To set the scene for you, and that's my intention this morning, Israel, approximately 500 years before the birth of Christ, divided into a northern kingdom called Samaria and a southern kingdom called Judah. The northern one ripped to shreds by Assyria. The southern one absolutely razed to the ground by Babylon. It is the southern kingdom, those who lived in the land of Judah and Benjamin, as they said, who were destroyed, and the intelligentsia, the people who were educated, the administrators, the upper class, the nobility, taken up lock, stock, and barrel and led in chains, leaving behind everything they had ever known, to become the servants of the land of Babylon, a great stretch of distance and miles in terms of religion and culture away. And there they were forced to live, those who had been God's people in God's land, in a land of other gods and other people who dominated them. The prophets understood that God had a problem and the Jews had a problem. The problem was that everything that had happened to the Jews seemed to contradict every promise God had ever made. How could they be his people if they were in such a mess? Did that not reflect poorly on him? And then they began to discover that they were in Babylon not because God had failed, but because he was faithful to his promise to discipline them and to punish them when they broke his covenant. And then there arose within them a great hope. If God was that faithful to his promises, perhaps if we repent, he will restore. And the prophets began to declare that if they did, he would, and they were right. And you will find God stirring up in the midst of a people with the ruins of their lives around them and calling out unto himself, again, a people to establish, a witness for him in Israel, where every city was burnt to the ground and where the temple, once the pinnacle of testimony to him, was pulled in shreds and the walls of Jerusalem pushed to the ground. How to rebuild those walls, how to re-erect that temple, and more important than that, how to reconstruct the worship of Jehovah God as a witness to the nations. You'll be amazed when you read it at how he did it and where he started. It will begin to stir you up inside to see that God is at work. I want to make a point today that you could understand only if you had read these books, and so I'll leave you on your own recognizance to read them. It is simply to say this. God started with a shattered people in order to rebuild. They were shattered politically. Their country was over. Their law was in ruins. They lived under the domination of the Babylonian kings, and after them the Persian kings who came in their place. The only reason that they were able to move at all was because God moved in the heart of those political leaders who did not acknowledge him. That gives me a cause for great joy. The God of heaven and earth can move in somebody who does not love him or acknowledge him in order to accomplish his purposes. He's not limited in that regard. They were shattered economically. When they left behind everything. They were shattered in a familial sense. You will read in there some of the strife and division that was created within families as a result of this decision and the edict of the king. Let everyone who wants to leave the land of Babylon and return to Jerusalem and rebuild it. God started with a shattered people. They were also shattered in terms of their own esprit de corps. The internal sense of strength was gone. They were broken. They were smashed. They were crushed under the heel of the oppressor, and they'd been that way for generations. It was this people that God stirred up. They had very few resources on their own, and the trip that they took was long and hard, leaving behind lives of relative ease to return to what? A city that looked basically like a fireplace at 6 o'clock in the morning. Nothing but ashes and stones. And to see ahead of them nothing but work. And to keep that work alive only because within their hearts they were possessed by a vision of what could be and what had once been and would be again if God would help them. And so they began to re-erect out of ashes, literally ashes. First, the altar, the place of worship, the worship rather. Secondly, the temple, the place of worship. And thirdly, the city, the place of witness, the city of God, Mount Zion. And what was smashed began to be rebuilt, block upon block upon block. They were also a people who had opposition on every side. You will see that in every step of the way. If they were the kind of people who said, the Lord has to open all the doors and I have to be able to move through without a hitch or else I won't do it, they were the people who stayed home and never left in the first place. Every step of the way, somebody was trying to stop them. And when they allowed themselves to be stopped. God raised up prophets and said, "You're not doing right. Get up and do what I told you to do." But the opposition was overcome. Now, time does not permit me to do anything more than to say this. We as a people are going to, in a real sense, leave one place and travel in a journey that will not only be spatial or geographical from this place to that place, but it will also be spiritual. It will be emotional. In many ways, it will be the same kind of trip that these people took. And unless God works in us as he worked in them, we will not make the journey that they made. But as we depend upon him, he will work in us as he worked in them, and we will make that journey. And what he accomplished through them, he will accomplish through us. Those people shattered are called together. Some took up the challenge. Others did not. Some said, "I will leave behind my house, which is now comfortable, albeit in Babylon, and my job, and my source of financial security, and et cetera, my relatives and friends, and my paid vacation, and my RRSP, and et cetera. And I will leave that for something that I consider to be an ideal, and go for something which was very similar to the words of Winston Churchill: I have nothing to offer you but blood, toil, sweat, and tears, when he spoke to the British people on the eve of the Second World War. That's all that lay ahead of them in Jerusalem. But they were convinced that God was in it and God wanted it done. And the people who left Babylon to go back to the mess of Jerusalem and invest their lives in building it up were people who supremely wanted to know God and to see what he could do, to the point that they were willing to make a fundamental personal sacrifice in order to see it accomplished. And may I point something else out? The vast majority of the Jews who occupied the Babylonian Empire at that time absolutely missed it all. They never went. They lost their identity as Jews, and they simply merged into the culture of their day and either disappeared or else became a little cluster, an enclave of Judaism, which was what replaced Israel, that met in this city or that city, always and forever under that domination. Oh, they benefited, because when the city was rebuilt and the temple was rebuilt, finally they were able to come and make a visit. But in terms of participation in what God had done in the building of it, they knew absolutely nothing and were miserable paupers. They never paid the sacrifice to go, so they got zero of the blessings that were available. It was their decision. The order went out, and it said, anyone who wishes to go. But somebody had to make a decision. The ones who opted for personal peace and affluence at any price stayed home and got only and everything that they had asked for. Those who left and went in terms of their sacrifice and their effort saw what God would do. What I'm saying this morning is obvious to you, I'm sure. If you think we are going to build this church the easy way and with a minimum amount of effort and no sacrifice, that you will not be required to get down on your knees and pray and before a holy God ask him, what do you want me to do? You are absolutely and fundamentally mistaken. In every building program of every church that has ever undergone one, there's some people who, as soon as it began, simply switched off and had nothing to do with it except to float along with the ride. And there's nothing wrong with that except to say this: if you choose that way, others will be blessed. You will simply be present. And that is all. Let me put it the other way around. Once commit your heart and your faith, however shaky it is to this, to the process of building what God wants built, I have nothing to promise you but blood, toil, sweat, and tears. Sacrifice, deprivation, and discomfort. And first-hand, experiential, within the heart knowledge of God's power and his willingness to keep his promises. Which do you want? That's what lays before us. And friends, we're committed to that path. There's no turning back. I'm not prejudging you. I'm not assuming what decision you will make. I'm not assuming what decision I will make. It's a decision that you make and then you remake it. They made the decision to leave and go, and then they got and they took a look at the mess. Let's go back. But no, we'll build the altar. Goodness gracious, what a mess. And then finally, after a supreme effort, the foundation of the temple is built. The foundation only. That's what we read there. And they have a celebration at the mere laying of the foundation. And what do they say? Some of them say, hallelujah. It's all they'd ever known. And others of them are in tears, for they know what they had once and lost. There will come a time when we'll have the same feelings. And we will look back and we will say, do you remember when we were in that little church there, and all we had to do was worry about paying the furnace bill? And we didn't have this absolutely enormous ziggurat of problems before us. How do we do this? How do we do that? We're going in to see the bank manager so many times, and etc. There'll be many times when we will remake the commitment that we've made. But you know, that happens with any commitment. You gave your life to Christ when you were 7 years old, but when you were 14, you had to revise that decision. Because now a 14-year-old had to make it. And you remade it again when you were 18. And then you remade it again when you were 21. By the way, if you haven't gone through that process, you ought to do it. You can't be 35 operating on a 7-year-old's commitment to Christ. Every commitment requires an update, and that is what lies before us. That's what lay before them. My challenge to you in reading these books is that God might stir up your heart to create within you a hunger to see him do something. And to get into it, not to float. But if you can do nothing more than pray, then pray with the profundity of a heart that wants and longs to see God exalted again, which is what they wanted to see. That's why they built the altar first, not the walls first. That will enter in, for instance, by reading these books prayerfully and saying, God, show me what you want to do. Show the pastor how to preach. More than anything else in the world, I want to see what he will do. I want to come to a day when we dedicate a new sanctuary and be part of a people. You know, they always fill the place. There's 300, 400 people that come out for something like that, but the vast majority of them have no idea what was involved. The vast majority of them have no idea of the blood, toil, sweat, and tears and answers to prayer, of the sacrifices that were made and the provisions that came. They have no idea about that. But I want to be part of a people who do know. And when they sing, to God be the glory, great things he hath done, it's not just to him. But they have a whole list, either in their minds or perhaps on a piece of paper, of prayers that were prayed and answers that were given. And they don't regret one evening of prayer that was set aside to seek God for something wherein, if he did not intervene, we were done. And did not come away perhaps lacking a little sleep, but rejoicing because they had seen what he had done. I can bring people here that can tell you story after story about how God has done that, but your heart won't be satisfied until he has done it for you. Neither will mine. And that's what it's about. I'm going to continue to look at the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, Haggai, and Zechariah from the standpoint of the things that I have seen here and outlined for you. And I challenge you to do the same. Now, let me tell you what we are going to do. The moment you've all been waiting for. At the end of this month, our church changes hands. It passes into the hands of those who are going to build a nursery school out of it. The boards have been faced with a decision in the last week as to where we would meet as a congregation. I'll explain to you how they made the decision in a moment. But I want to tell you that we will be worshiping from that point on in the Cedarvale Community Center. The reasons for that decision, which came as much as a surprise to us as it does to some of you, were these. Originally, we had thought, and it is still true, that we might rent these facilities from the owners. That is a possibility even at this moment. However, there are two things at least that militated against that. One was economic. The price that they were asking for the rental of the facilities was over twice what was recommended to us, and considerably more than the use of the facilities at Cedarvale. And the boards are simply aware of the fact that we've got to be good stewards of our money, and that we need to take into account the cost factor. I might say that in recent negotiations with the people that operate Cedarvale, our costs may be even lower than we had originally intended. But that's the smallest part. The biggest part is this. 2 weeks ago, 132 people worshiped with us on a Sunday morning. There were very few of those that were visitors. Our attendance has not dropped below 116 people since the 1st of January. That was the lowest. 117 is common. If everyone in our church family were present on a Sunday morning, we would have, I believe, in excess of 150 people of all shapes and sizes. That includes the little ones. That means that we are full in terms of elbow room. Now, some of you can feel plenty of elbow room here, but if I bring up all of the kids that we had downstairs, you won't. And you saw the lineup of little ones that went past. And what you didn't see were the number of babies we have in the nursery and the number of toddlers that we have shoehorned into the kitchen, and the tightness that was there. So what I'm saying to you is that the board's major consideration is space. And as far as we can determine, there's far more space available to us down at Cedarvale than there is here. In addition to the space that we need right now, we are making steps to reach out in evangelism to lead people to Christ and to the church. We need to have room for them to grow and for them to be present with us. More than that, when the nursery school comes in, they are going to make some fairly major changes in the downstairs area. For instance, they want to build a wall down the middle of it. That will effectively slice Sunday school and junior worship into two pieces. Then, on either side of that, they want to have the furniture necessary for two nursery schools. Those are water boxes and sand boxes and etc., all of the things that they legitimately need, which makes the operation of Sunday school and junior worship a pain in the neck. Not through any fault of their own. The people who bought the building are in the highest order of individuals. But it would simply restrict the space we even have now. I want to say to you that my own attitude towards this is that I think the Lord's hand is in it. His hand is in it because of the space and the financial arrangements that we are making there. His hand is in it because of the ease with which we will be able to move into that. For instance, some people, when they go to facilities like that, have to bring their hymn books with them every Sunday. We will be able to store ours there. It is true that we'll need to bring them out every Sunday. And all of us will have to get involved in making sure that all the little details are done. But it makes it so much easier. In addition to that, we'll be able to have an office on the premises. And far more than that, I believe that our ministry is going to be expanded. There will be more room for children. There will be better room, and there will be more than one bathroom. And it'll even have hot water in it. More than that, there will be all of the great outdoors, which in the summer weather will be an excellent place for ministry to children and for ministry to one another as well. We are going to be able to have space, for instance, so that a Sunday school class will not have 6 other ones talking in its ear at the same time. You might even be able to have a room of your own. We don't know. We're working on it. There will be, and this is something that is very dear to my heart, we are expecting to have a much nicer and much more commodious room for babies and for toddlers, those little kids who have been, get them in the door there and lock it quick before they get out. Sometimes they escape and get up here before service. Those little kids, we owe them a lot, and I believe we're going to have a greater provision for that. You need to pray for the elders and deacons, because they've got to be the ones that give the leadership in making the transition, and we don't even know what it's like to do it. That's where we're going. The decision's been taken, God is in it, and that's like leaving Babylon. There's a lot of things that are going to happen on the way, but that's the direction we're going. And like anybody who takes a trip, I'm excited. Some of you wonder about property, and someone has said to me in the last while, are you operating on a business-like basis in negotiating for property? Yes, we are. We even have our offers to purchase done on a word processor by computer. I don't know how much more business-like you can get. Our status right now is that we have placed an offer on the plaza property at $200,000 and have placed a down payment along with it by way of certified check, which is not at this point in cash. We have negotiated as far as we know to go. We're stuck in this respect. Those who own the property will not give us an answer. That is not that they will give us an answer no. They will not give us any answer. They do not say yes, and they do not say no, and they often don't answer the phone either, or return your calls, rather. This has been true for us, and it has been true for the lawyer. And we are somewhat frustrated at this point, beginning to ask and seek the Lord for some movement in the situation. I'm going to, in the future, call the congregation to an evening of prayer together with me to ask God for his direction, to give some movement in this area so that we can know what we ought to do. That's where we stand with regard to property. I can give you any other details. I would like you to stand with me. Will you? In a moment, we'll sing hymn 417, which is very appropriately, Lead On, O King Eternal. But I want to pray and commit us to the course that we're going and to the Lord who will sustain us on it. Let's bow in prayer. Loving God and Heavenly Father, our hope is in you. And as befits your greatness, we have asked great things from God and attempted great things for him. Supply our needs, lead us, and glorify yourself. Show us yourself and the things that you do. Thank you for your presence with us and the greatness of your power. Amen.